Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really big question. How did the American low-wage economy get built? According to the source material we're looking at, it wasn't an accident. It was a systematic process that unfolded over the last 50 years. And you know what? The whole story kicks off with a really surprising economic puzzle.
All right, so to really get a grip on where we are today, we've got to rewind the clock. We're going back about 5 decades to a major economic mystery that really set the stage for everything. Okay, check this out. This chart tells a really powerful story. For decades, there was this kind of unwritten rule in the American economy. When companies got more productive, their workers shared in the success. Simple, right? Your paycheck grew along with the economy. But then, look what happens right around 1970. The productivity line, it just keeps soaring upwards. But the line for real wages, it just stops. It completely flatlines. That fundamental link, the one that built the middle class, was just broken. And that right there, that's the central question we're digging into today. What on earth happened? Why did the economic engine that lifted up entire generations of workers just suddenly stall out? Well, according to the source material we're breaking down, the answer isn't really found in economics textbooks. No, to find the answer, you have to look at politics. It argues that a series of very specific political strategies actually laid the foundation for this whole massive economic shift. And it all happened in a really short burst of time. Just look at this. Within a few years, these 3 key events basically set a whole new course for the country. You've got Nixon's election, the start of the war on drugs, and the appointment of Lewis Powell to the Supreme Court. Now, the source argues these weren't just random events happening at the same time. Nope. They were all connected pieces of a brand new political playbook. Let's start with the Southern strategy. This was a political tactic, plain and simple, that tapped right into the racial tensions of the time. The idea was to appeal to white voters, particularly in the South, who were anxious about the changes brought on by the civil rights movement. And by doing that, it built this powerful new political coalition that, according to our source, basically fused people's economic concerns with their racial anxieties.
And that brings us to the war on drugs. Now, our source points to the work of author Michelle Alexander, who argues that this campaign turned into something else entirely, what she calls the new Jim Crow. The core idea here is that this wasn't just about drugs. It was about how the laws were enforced. They were applied so disproportionately against African Americans that it effectively created a new system of social control, this time through the prison system. Okay, so with that political stage set, let's get into the economics. Because this is where the rules of work itself, the very nature of having a job in America, began to radically, completely change. So our source points to what was basically a perfect storm of 3 huge interconnected forces that started to pull apart the old system. First up, technology. Computers and automation started doing all the routine, rule-based jobs, the exact kind of factory work that had been the backbone of the middle class for so long. Second, you have this big shift in the world of finance. Companies were now being pushed to focus only on their core business and to outsource everything else. We're talking cleaning crews, security, you name it. And third, globalization. A massive wave of cheaper imports came in, and suddenly companies could say, hey, take a pay cut, or we'll just move the whole factory offshore. And this comparison right here, wow, it really nails the transformation. It's like a before and after picture of the American workplace. On the left, in the before, you see things like in-house services, a sense of fairness among workers, pensions. There was a social contract there, a feeling of being in it together. Now look at the after column. It's all subcontracting and franchising. Your wage is now a contract price. And that old sense of job security and a pension? Gone. Replaced by a 401k plan you have to manage yourself. The whole relationship just became transactional. And here's why that matters so much. This new way of doing things completely severed the connection between a worker and the big company whose brand they were actually serving. Think about it. A janitor working at a huge tech campus no longer works for that tech company. No, they work for a third-party cleaning contractor. And that contractor's #1 goal? To keep costs down so they can win the next bid. So any sense of loyalty or morale just gets squeezed out by this constant downward pressure on wages. So let's talk about the human cost of all this. Because these weren't just abstract shifts on a spreadsheet, right? They had real, tangible, and often devastating consequences for millions and millions of people. The war on drugs, for example, fueled an absolute explosion in the prison population, and the racial disparities were just staggering. Get this. One projection suggested if things stay the way they are,
A black man born today has a 1 in 3 chance, 1 in 3, of being imprisoned at some point in his life. That statistic alone just shows you the deep, lasting impact of mass incarceration.
And just to put that into perspective a little bit more, Black Americans make up less than 15% of the total U.S. population, but they account for 40% of the prison population. I mean, that's just a stark illustration of how unequally these laws were enforced on the ground. And this leads the source to a pretty powerful conclusion. Here's the kicker. In the 1990s, incarceration rates just kept going up and up, even while crime rates across the country were actually falling. This suggests that maybe, just maybe, the goal had shifted from simply controlling crime to something broader, a different kind of social control. But the human cost wasn't just in the justice system. The Flint water crisis is presented here as a heartbreaking case study of how these economic forces can play out. You see, as those good manufacturing jobs left Flint, the city's tax base just collapsed. The state stepped in and appointed an emergency manager whose main job, their only job really, was to cut costs. And that single-minded focus on saving money led directly to the decision to switch the city's water source. And we all know the tragic preventable public health disaster that followed. And when you add all of these pressures together, the economic stress, the public health crises, you end up with maybe the most fundamental inequality of all. The source points out that today, people in the high-skill part of the economy are literally living longer than those in the low-wage sector. So the consequences, they aren't just about how much money you make. It's literally a matter of life and death. So, after all of this, where did it all lead? What's the end result? Well, the source argues that the culmination of all these political and economic changes is a country with a fundamentally divided economy. The term the source uses is the dual economy. And the idea is pretty simple. We don't really have one single American economy anymore. We have two. It's like they're operating on two different planets. In one world, you have the FTE sector. That's finance, technology, and electronics. And it's full of high-skill, high-wage professionals. And then in the other world, you have the low-wage sector, filled with service jobs where the pay is low, there's zero job security, and workers have very little power. Now, this is an absolutely critical point. The source argues that while many of the political moves that created this system were, in fact, racially motivated, the low-wage economy that resulted, it doesn't discriminate. Just look at the demographics of the low-wage sector today. It's majority white. So people of all races from all backgrounds are now trapped in this world of economic instability. And according to our source, understanding this deep economic divide, this dual economy, is the absolute key to making sense of so many of the social and political conflicts we see today. And that leaves us with one final really big question to think about. What happens to a society? What happens to us when our citizens are effectively living in two completely different economic worlds?